Before I go into the details of my encounters, I'd like to share a near-death experience I had in 2011 at the age of 71. Alan McD died and resurrected several times owing to heart block. On August 18, 2011, I died several times on the resuscitation table due to third-stage heart block. I went through the entire drama of my heart stopping and flatlining several times. Adrenaline and atropine were administered directly into my heart, and shock paddles and chest depressions had to be used repeatedly in an attempt to get my heart to beat normally again. I no longer have any reservations regarding life beyond death. When my heart stopped beating, my soul, or consciousness, left my body and entered other realms of existence. I only remembered a small portion of what happened during those 3 hours of life and death fight. But recently, I've started to recall more and more about the odd otherworldly regions I witnessed during that time. I returned each time they got my heart to beat. I saw a large crowd assembled to welcome me to the hereafter. My entire family was present. It appeared to be a welcome home party, but as soon as the physicians got my heart beating again, I was lured back to the physical world. Another time, I observed a tree with a lot of books around it. Reading what was on the covers, I realized they contained all of existence's knowledge and riddles. What was in all the smaller books seemed to be consolidated into one very huge book. When I tried to raise it, I discovered it was too heavy to carry, so I decided to return for it later. I saw a lovely pulsing sphere of golden light that I mistook for the Lord Jesus because it exuded perfect peace and love. I had no tunnel experience or encounter with a being of light, I believe because the medical team was constantly resuscitating me. After 3 hours, the physicians implanted a temporary pacemaker to keep my pulse going. The doctor informed me that I was truly really dead. The doctor claimed it would have been impossible to revive me if I had arrived at the hospital even 5 minutes later. I'm now 71 years old. I would not have minded dying at that age. I believe there must be some things remaining for me to do, because a series of fortunate coincidences allowed me to survive. On that Thursday night, I had taken a nap, and a great buddy of mine called me late at night, which he had never done before. My heart was racing and almost stopped when I awoke. My wife quickly called an ambulance, and they arrived at my house in 7 minutes. The hospital is only about a half-kilometer away from my house. I was there in 5 minutes, and when I arrived, I was immediately attended to. I should mention that if my friend had not called me at that precise moment, I would have never woken up and perished in my sleep. I now have a permanent pacemaker in my chest that is expected to last 10 years. Despite the severe shock, I'm very much alive and healthy. Also, complete atrial or ventricle heart block is the medical phrase for what occurred to me. I've known and seen things that others haven't since I was a small child. Many people thought of me as a peculiar and intriguing young man, and some still do. I frequently baffled and even scared my parents, family, and teachers. I used to wonder why my parents only greeted individuals who came in via the front door, and overlooked the delightful and sometimes terrifying folks who wandered in through the walls. I could tell when a person or a family member was in pain or feeling ill simply by glancing at them and commenting on what was bothering them at the moment. I could feel their discomfort and the location of the ailment on their body. As a child, I had 3 ethereal buddies or childhood imaginary friends. Ginnery, Rough Raven, and Claudius are their names. Of course, they are or were my true guardian beings or guardian angels, as the case may be. My folks called them my imaginary buddies, but how could a 3-year-old boy come up with such complicated names? I frequently informed my parents and grandparents that I saw Jesus in heaven, and even went swimming with him on occasion, reminding them he didn't wear a frock or have a beard. I also heard and saw unusual sounds and voices and smelled things that other people didn't notice. An occurrence from a long time ago that stands out strongly in my recollection is having to walk a great distance home with my parents late at night since we had missed the late-night bus after a movie. During the stroll, I told my folks not to worry. I told them I'd pray for a bus to pick us up on the way. I prayed, and the bus came and stopped, the driver telling us he would take us home for free. To my parents' surprise, he dropped us off directly in front of our townhouse. As a 6-year-old boy, I walked a dangerous route home from school, and my parents would have had no idea where I was or went if I got lost or wounded. A little narrow gravel path wound its way through a dense forest of trees. It was about 1.5 miles long, and when I got to the end of it, I saw a gigantic man with an ugly grin on his face. I became terrified because I knew in my heart that he was out to harm me in some manner. I began to walk faster, but he easily kept up. The faster I walked, the faster he walked, gradually narrowing the space between us. To my surprise, the next thing I knew, there was a kind man walking alongside me. When the enormous, terrible man spotted this lovely individual, he seemed surprised and proceeded to back off further and further until I couldn't see him anymore. Joe, my nickname, continued to walk with me and led me out of the dense plantation. Never ever go alone in this plantation again. Promise me that, Joe. I turned to thank him, but he had already left. He had simply vanished. I truly believe he was an angel who had assumed the human form. My worried parents and aunts were looking for me everywhere. My Aunt Bessie later told me that she had found me at the end of the short trail. She was convinced that it was an angel from God when I told her the story. I didn't really appreciate the occurrence at the time, but as time passed, I realized that God had sent one of his beautiful angels to save me. I adore God. The account of my understanding of the mystical, as well as the skies and the hereafter, as well as my experiences begins here. I died early one morning when everything was still dark. I stood up till the blue turned black. I awoke in a dark realm where the boundaries between my physical self and everything physical around me gradually disintegrated. I noticed an infinite number of stars lighting up the still dark early morning sky. Quietness crept on my body, spirit, and mind like a soft, warm, comforting, tranquil blanket. Even though I was no longer in my corporeal body, I could still hear the wonderful music of chirping. I knew their sweet and magnificent, beautiful voices were in complete harmony as one, representing in audible form the fundamental practices that dance and dart like tiny electrons within God's limitless intellect. Despite the fact that my corporeal body was still inside on a bed, I could feel the chilly breeze. Nonetheless, I continued to enjoy and absorb the exquisite scents of grass and floral perfumes that permeated the real earth. In some sense, I had split into two independent entities with interconnected consciousnesses. I transformed into a small point of pure golden energy and rose high above the earth, where the blue morning sky turned black, and I looked down on it. I saw it from afar in the tangible cosmos, in the majesty and glory of the boundless night. I found myself in the presence of an entity that appeared to me to be pushing a golden orb similar to my current state of being, but considerably brighter and more vibrant. At the time, I assumed this being was God. I afterwards realized he was my guardian angel. For a time, I was the small, bright point of thinking light, a singularity, and a point of intelligence within the wider light that surrounded me. This creature eventually revealed to me, mind to mind, some beautiful things that occur in the afterlife, on Earth and in the physical universes. This entity communicated with me constantly, as he led me on a long and intense voyage through undiscovered mystical planes, dimensions, heavenly spiritual locations, and kingdoms. Later, he told me that he had been my constant companion throughout my life, my childhood protector angel. I began to recall how he had communicated with me and helped me overcome the awful trauma and difficulties I had to experience as a tiny child, as well as my dreadful struggle with manic depressive disorder as an adult. I found myself peering down at the Earth's globe, as if through the viewport of a spaceship, and noted that it was circling quite swiftly. I was making pit stops in each country. The great angel of God issued a severe warning to each leader. I am dissatisfied with you, mortal man. The earth then moved again till it came to a stop over another country, and so on. I didn't have an ethereal body at this point. I remained a single point of light or strong thought. As we hovered in orbit above the earth continued to circle and pause, each time over a different country or continent. I continued to hear the big angel screaming out its loud and stern warning after halting over a country, saying to each nation in turn, "Mere mortal man, I'm not well pleased with you." I recall vividly flying over the Asian continent, looking down on India and the Middle East, that a major tragedy would strike this region. It would emerge from beneath the Indian Ocean and wreak havoc on the Indian subcontinent and countless other people in far-flung areas. This warning was later validated by the events of the 2004 Indian subcontinent earthquake and the ensuing devastating tsunami, which killed over 250,000 people. Later, I remember that some of the angel's other warnings to mankind had also come true, particularly Hurricane Katrina and the terrible typhoon that devastated Burma in 2008, killing 250,000 people. The 9.1 earthquake that struck Japan in 2010. There are numerous such warnings of terrible calamities that must occur in the near future. God is speaking to mankind through these calamities, saying, "Wake up, look up, and attempt to realize what is coming upon the earth very soon." The reader may wonder, how true is this article? My response would be that they are entirely subjectively true. It is a true reflection of what I went through when in a deep coma and in an altered state of consciousness when I was very sick. Are they accurate representations of some of my life's mysteries? I can't say for definite. I'm going to try to recount my near-death experiences while I was critically ill and in a deep death coma. This is an almost hard endeavor since one must attempt to convey the weird and alien multidimensions of the other side of life in a way that is understandable in our three-dimensional material world. I was in a dark spot and did not have the typical into-the-light tunnel experience. I appeared to have transformed into a dense, powerful point of intelligent light energy. I had no body, yet I was the personality that resided in my earthly body. I transformed into pure, unadulterated thought. That's the best way I can put it. There, I was occasionally met by a pure light being. I witnessed a pure point of light communicating with me mind to mind, as if through telepathy. I initially thought it was God, but it was eventually demoted to an angel. The creature then showed me the tunnel that normally follows a near-death experience. Except for the point of intelligent light, I couldn't see either end of the tunnel because we were in complete blackness. It was like being out of body. According to what I was told, one end of the tunnel led to the light and the other into the dark emptiness. This entity of light explained to me that this tunnel had two endings. One is led into God's magnificent light, while the other is led into the darkness of the abyss. Darkness, or evil, cannot infiltrate the light since even one candle dispels it. Only the light, or goodness, has the ability to influence the darkness. Initially, I was led through the tunnel to a learning facility, or a library. I emerged into the wonderful light at the end of this seemingly endless tunnel. I had strong sentiments of elation, love, and calm while in the light. I was shown big events that would occur on Earth at some point in the future. There was a being with me at all times that I couldn't see but could hear. It spoke like a man's voice. I thought it, or he, was what we mortals called God. Later, I learned that the being was not God, but rather a highly evolved entity similar to an angel. I could see a panoramic view of the Earth while this was going on, as if I were a spaceman staring out the window of a spacecraft. The voice I heard was dissatisfied with what was going on in our world. It kept referring to humanity as mere mortal man. I'm angry with you. I can't remember why he was upset. While this unseen creature of pure light was speaking, the earth began circling and stopping at intervals over each continent, where each continent received a warning message. What I recall him expressing to humanity was that he was dissatisfied with their terrible activities in some way. The difficult part is that I couldn't remember anything this entity said to plain mortal man while we were on Earth together. I do, however, recall hearing two cautions. The first is that a cataclysmic calamity will begin in the Indian subcontinent. The other was that the Middle East conflicts would not be handled by human peacekeeping efforts, and that divine direct involvement would occur at some point in the future. This is because of the incredible wrongdoing that some regular guys were performing and being personally accountable for on Earth. The Earth has been raped. Then became Hurricane Katrina and a tsunami. It was also demonstrated to me that we are evaluated by our own choices in life, which determine where we begin our afterlife eternal destiny. If all our deeds had been completely negative, we would have become beings of darkness by the end of life, making it possible for us to enter the light of God. The light cannot be penetrated by darkness. This type of person's fate would be to be exiled into the deepest darkness of this immense, infinitely long pit of the tunnel, into the black abyss I mentioned earlier, far from God's love. I was also shown that the vacuum had many levels of punishment. From a dreary, melancholy environment to complete horror, dread, hopelessness, despair, and desolation and black darkness. I received the clear sensation that one day God will send all wickedness away from Him into the boundless, completely remote darkness of the deep and forget it forever. Existence has a beautiful balance. While the dark abyss is terrifying, the domain of the light is so calm, loving, wonderful, and even euphoric that there are no words in the English language to adequately explain it. As a result, we all have varied degrees of light within us that will enable us to enter this beautiful light of Almighty God at the conclusion of our earthly lives. God may use the light within us to purify us and allow us to ascend the many levels of heaven into His eternal blissful presence of everlasting peace and joy. It is the progression of everlasting learning. Then we become one with God while retaining our individual self-awareness and personalities for all time. My psychic ability was heightened by the above near-death experience, and I began to travel in an out-of-body state. With the passage of time, I've begun to recall more and more of those bizarre voyages to the other side of physical life.